And I really didn't like the prairie very much when I moved here because I came here from the Great North Woods. Wow, there's no trees. Who wants to live here? So I am a convert. I mean, I decided I was going to live here and I was going to learn about this biome, and I have fallen in love. It's spectacular. It is the most diverse biome in Minnesota. I mean, everybody flocks to see the North Woods, the least diverse biome.
Welcome to the 380th installment of Ear to the Ground, the Land Stewardship Project's podcast on family farming, regenerative agriculture, community food systems, and local democracy. I'm Brian DeVore, editor of the Land Stewardship Letter. Here's a tip. Go on a walk with someone who is extremely knowledgeable and passionate about the landscape you happen to be hiking through at the moment. I guarantee it will be an eye-opening way to make your day. Over the years, through my work with the Land Stewardship Project, I've had the great opportunity to go on walks with farmers, scientists, naturalists, and other land experts who were willing and able to interpret a world that previously I had been pretty oblivious to. Thanks to those hikes, I've been on the receiving end of deep insights into how soil functions and water shapes the landscape, as well as the key role all those buzzing insects play in agroecology, and how grassland birds can be key indicators of whether a certain farming practice is truly regenerative. During a recent LSP event on a western Minnesota prairie, I and several other folks benefited from the energetic expertise of Amy Rager. Amy is with the University of Minnesota's Master Naturalist program and knows prairies like nobody's business. That's ironic, given that she was somewhat ambivalent about this biome when she first moved to western Minnesota. It turns out converts really do make the biggest zealots. During the LSP event in early August, she took us on a hike through the Chippewa Prairie Preserve near Lac Oparo State Park. The preserve is a native grassland that's never been plowed, and Amy started the walk with this exciting statement. When you look at your feet, the diversity is off the charts. Amy was right, and as she explained later, the diversity beneath the surface of that prairie is even more impressive. The Prairie Walk was a fitting precursor to a special book event LSP sponsored at the state park later that afternoon. During that event, Dave Hoggy and Josephine McCarty, the authors of Sea of Grass, The Conquest, Ruin, and Redemption of Nature on the American Prairie, described how in less than a century, we plowed up 300 million acres of grass in the United States. Minnesota alone once had 18 million acres of tall grass prairie. Today, the state only has around 250,000 acres of native grassland left, and it's in constant threat of shrinking further. It's no surprise that all that rich soil created by deep-rooted prairie plants made it very attractive to replace this incredibly diverse perennial biome with annual row crops like corn and soybeans. But Sea of Grass is not all doom and gloom, and I highly recommend reading it, if only to learn how innovative farmers and ranchers are working with environmentalists to find ways to bring back some of that perennial habitat on working ag land. For me personally, reading Sea of Grass reinforced what I've been hearing from farmers who are committed to building soil health by diversifying their cropping and grazing systems. More than once in recent years, I've run into farmers who say they are quote-unquote thinking like a prairie when adopting a certain technique or system. But to care enough about something to save it, or at the least integrate aspects of it into working farmland, you need to learn just how valuable and fascinating it is. That's where knowledgeable, high-octane advocates like Amy come in. After the book event, she and I stood next to a restored prairie near the state park's visitor center and chatted about what we may be missing when we speed by a native grassland on the highway and the role regenerative livestock grazing can play in supporting this habitat. We even had a bit of a debate about what exactly is the coolest prairie plant out there. So Amy, we just had a really nice prairie walk. We went to two different kinds of prairies. One was a native prairie that's never been plowed. It was here thousands of years ago. Would that be true?
10,000 years.
10,000 years? 10,000 years ago. Can you describe a little bit about when we walk out into a prairie like that? Because I know when people drive by at 60 miles an hour, it just looks like a uniform, as they say, sea of grass. But that's not what we're seeing. I mean, when we go into there, this is the 2nd of August. What are we seeing in a prairie like that? What did we see today, or what would we see in a native prairie like that that's been there for, like you say, 10,000 years?
Yeah, it's really cool. This time of the year, the C4 grasses, which are the warm season grasses, are really going to town. So your prairie grass is starting to get tall, but the forbs, which is the fancy word for flowers, are really starting to come into their own too. So we're starting to see more and more color. Things also bloom on the prairie according to height. So earlier in the season, the short stuff has already bloomed and is done and gone to seed. Now we're getting the stuff that's knee height, maybe waist height, and later in the season it's going to get taller and more colorful, and it'll be colorful and fabulous until we get a hard freeze.
And we saw, I mean, when we stepped out there, you said, okay, look at your feet and count how many species you had. I mean, how many species were we seeing?
Well, I think the low number was like 9. Yeah. And when I do this with some of my classes, the high number can be 40. So I give them a hula hoop and ask them to snug it down to the ground and see how many different species they find in a hula hoop. And 40 is about the max you're ever going to see, but the minimum and the average is like 15.
The other thing that I'm always struck by, and I had asked you a little bit about this over here with the lead plant, is how deep those roots are going. I mean, that's what, to me, is really, because it's one thing if you can get, like right now we're looking at some big blue stem that's chest high, a little bit head high almost, but it's the roots. Can you talk about that root system?
Yeah, the root system is designed for a couple of reasons. Prairie plants are all about adaptations because they live in a pretty harsh environment. It's pretty hot and dry here most of the time. So prairie roots are not only designed to help them go deep into the soil to find all that water, but they help keep them upright in the winter. Think of a prairie when you drive by in the winter and see those grasses, they're still standing up. Mm-hmm. That's because the roots are deep. And typically, if you think about a plant, the roots are at least 3 times what you see on the top. So if we see a 5-foot piece of grass, we have 15 feet of roots underneath. Some have even deeper roots, depending upon the species. So those roots go very far under the soil.
And what are some of the impacts of that? I mean, one of the things that I've heard people talk about is, for one thing, they're able to store and sequester carbon. We talk about how much carbon was released when those were tilled and all of that, but the other thing is the amount of water that it can manage. That, I mean, talk about some of those services that's in the minerals that can draw up from the deep within the system.
Yeah, the roots are really they really are the most important part of the plant. I mean, the stuff above ground is just the frosting on the cake. Yeah. So the roots do all the work. I mean, they're finding all that water underground, getting all of those nutrients, the microbes they need. Sometimes they have individual relationships with certain fungus so that they can even grow. So there are just so many things that those roots do. They are very, very important. Another thing is sometimes the important growing point on the top of the plant is actually just a titch below the soil. So if we have a prairie fire, again, those roots are protecting that plant from fire so that there's regrowth right away.
So Amy, you do the Minnesota Master Naturalist Program. What are that must be a really, I'm just curious what kind of people look into that program, and what is it? It must be a real fun to kind of open up that world to them a little bit, because as we just had a book talk here about Sea of Grass with Dave Hoggy and Josephine McCarty, and one of the points that they made was it is a overlooked biome by far, in which I think you would probably agree with, but that must be fun to kind of open people's eyes to that a little bit.
Yeah, I actually love doing these little prairie walks and taking people out. I actually grew up in Duluth, so I'm well versed in the tourism and visiting folk, but I always tell people we are as good on the prairie as it is in northeastern Minnesota. You just don't know it yet. There are so many cool things to see. I mean, as we're standing here, there's monarchs flittering around us. We saw tiger swallowtail butterflies today. We've seen many species of bumblebees. You just have to stop and look. It's maybe not quite as obvious at 60 miles an hour on the highway, but if you get out and take a look, it's fascinating and kind of an addicting little thing to start paying attention to. So everybody should, take a walk through your favorite ditch. I would encourage you, because you'll be surprised at all the things that are living there.
Well, I was struck that one of the points Dave made was, I didn't know this, the National Park Service didn't even really recognize the first kind of national park that was a prairie until 1974. He credited maybe the appreciation that we have more in recent years is the science around it and the soil health connection. It sounds like that's really helped people kind of appreciate that more. I think maybe there's a little bit of the interest in carbon sequestration, pollinators, what's affecting the pollinators, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think it's totally true. And it's more, information is more available to regular people, not just to people in agriculture. Now the common person understands, why do I need to have a bumblebee pollinating my plants? And that's really important.
So one of the things I noticed when we were out at the native prairie was there's cattle grazing on there. And that might surprise a lot of people. Can you talk about why that's part of the management system of a native prairie like that?
Sure, we can. Prairies require some sort of disturbance. And naturally, disturbance would come as fire or grazing or burning. And so, since we have removed all the bison from the landscape, we have to mimic that grazing with something else. So, many agencies that manage prairies put cattle on them and allow the cattle to graze, and they take them off, and then that mimics the bison. And that doesn't hurt the plants at all. Remember, all the important stuff is under the soil. So they're just eating off that biomass from the top and cleaning up the ground and allowing it to be fresh and ready to go next spring when the plants are ready to grow again.
Yeah, I think that does surprise people. I mean, the comparison that's been made, as you alluded to, is the bison used to disturb those prairies, but it was a different. I mean, we're not going to go back to that, where it was the bison would come back maybe a year or two later kind of thing. This is more a frequent disturbance. But there is that need for disturbance. I mean, we've seen it when you put in CRP and there's no disturbance and it just kind of becomes a monocrop of switchgrass or brome or whatever. But this is that idea of really trying to get that diverse mosaic in there.
Yeah, that's correct. And the cattle do more than just eat it. I mean, they have hooves and they're walking in there. We saw today there were some places where it was a little muddy. They're pooping, they're fertilizing. So they're providing a lot of ecosystem services that we would be paying, state agencies or federal agencies to do. So this is a good win-win, I think, for what we have, since we don't have bison to put back on the landscape.
So the second place, and we're standing next to it right now here at the Visitor Center at the Lac Coparo State Park, is a restored prairie. And I was wondering if you could, first of all, talk a little bit about, when we talk about a restored prairie, what does that mean? What's gone into bringing back this prairie here that probably was farmland at one point or whatever? But what was it what actually kind of went into this, and how many years are we talking about that it take to bring this? It looks pretty good to me, but I know it's not as probably rich and diverse as that native prairie.
Yeah, that's correct. This one went in in about 1999, 2000, and typically at that time we were using a mix of 5 native grasses. So that's pretty much what we see here are the big 5. Big blue stem, little blue stem, switchgrass, Indian grass, and side oats grandma would have been out here. All those we can still see today, depending on the moisture and soil type underneath, because that really matters. This has been interseeded with forbs a few times since then, because we've gotten smarter. Maybe we shouldn't have put so much grass in. Maybe we should have had a more even mix of flowers and grasses. So we've done, as humans, we've learned to be better at it. So we've tried to correct some of our mistakes. But this is a pretty good looking prairie, and I will say that it's never really a full restoration. I mean, we're trying to recreate something that we can't recreate. Yeah. The whole point of this is, if you till it up, it's gone. And so we shouldn't be tilling native prairie up. We need to protect as much as we can. Again, I mean, it would be helping greatly in climate change. The authors today talked about, it being the most endangered ecosystem, even more than the rainforest. I think people are surprised to hear that as well, that this really matters. It holds a lot of carbon. It's really important for a lot of reasons.
Something like this, and I think that's another point that was made today, is we're probably, unfortunately, in our lifetimes, never going to see the return of that sea of grass, or because it was such a dominant biome in this region. But it sounds like we can make inroads a little bit, and we kind of can integrate it into maybe even working farmland type things. I mean, do you see hope in that, some of those areas?
Sure, I think it's the hope we have to look for. They were talking today about, buffer strips, grass waterways, using native plants rather than, some other agricultural crop. And that's a great idea, and I'm not sure that farmers would be opposed to that. I think perhaps some of them haven't thought about it, or those are things that haven't been suggested to them. So that's a great way to get some of that those plants back into our native landscape.
So how long have you been studying prairies, or how long have you been into prairies?
So I moved here 34 years ago. And I really didn't like the prairie very much when I moved here because I came here from the Great North Woods where I thought, wow, there's no trees. Who wants to live here? So I am a convert. I mean, I decided I was going to live here and I was going to learn about this biome, and I have fallen in love. It's spectacular. It is the most diverse biome in Minnesota. I mean, everybody flocks to see the North Woods, the least diverse biome. We have the most critters and plants and animals for you to see here. So, this is the place, and I truly do love it, and I think everybody should just take a little bit of time and learn something about it and visit a prairie near you sometime in the next year.
Well, now I'll be getting emails from northern Minnesota.
Sorry. I love it there too.
Well, you were mentioning too, you showed us, and this is, I mean, it's not impressive to people who probably don't know what's going on here, but we've got this little island in the parking lot that you said was part of your master's project, I think. Yeah. How many years ago was that?
1999.
So that's real. Yeah, back in 1999, you got lead plant there, which you said the roots can go down 20 feet or whatever. I mean, when I see something like that and you explain that, it makes me a little bit more aware. It kind of widens my world a little bit because I'm like, oh, there's something there that I just would overlook, that type of thing. So it'd be great to get thousands and thousands of acres installed and restored, but these little pieces, like you said, you talked about the prairie strips, and I've done some pieces on prairie strips in Iowa and seen, boy, the incredible biodiversity you can see just in those systems. I mean, there is hope, I guess, in these little kind of corners. Aldo Leopold used to talk about that, these little odd corners that you can see on some of the land. There is opportunity there.
Yeah, you got to do what you can do in your own world, right? In Minnesota, the Lawns to Legumes program is a great way for homeowners who aren't farmers to get involved. There are grants you can get for small plots in your yard, and you can plant a small native little plot in your yard. So look into that. I mean, do the best you can. When you're planting plants, choose native varieties rather than, some of the horticultural options. They're really great for our native wildlife as well.
You said you had to be converted. You weren't a big fan of prairies, and you've been converted. What's the coolest thing you have over the years learned about prairies that you were like, oh my gosh, this is it, I'm sold on it?
I don't know, there's some really cool things. Okay, one of my very favorite things is I love cup plant, and it's a plant that has leaves that kind of stick around the stem and they hold water, and so birds actually come drink out of it because it's hot on the prairie. So you'll see this tall plant, it's probably 5 feet tall, and it's got this little water fountain, and little tiny birds are drinking out of it like that. Okay, super cool adaptations. Adaptations that's the word on the prairie.
That's a really good example. Is there a prairie plant that? See, it shows my ignorance on this. That
orients with the sun?
No, that drills into the.
Oh yes, I
love
that.
Talk about that one.
Porcupine grass.
Yeah.
So a needlegrass does the same thing, and it has a sharp end. It looks like a needle and thread, and the needle is an inch long or so, and then it has 3 tails. They're called awns, A-W-N. And if you pick it, you can see there's black and white and then kind of an in-between color. And when the plant gets wet, the seeds twist around one direction. And when it dries out, it twists around the other. So it literally is a drill. And it also sticks to your clothes. So if you're walking through the prairie, you're moving it to new spots where it's going to fall off and drill itself in. I actually have some stuck in the ceiling of my car because I always get them stuck in my pants, and then I look and I got this big wad of twisted up seeds stuck in the headliner of my truck.
So the next time you go home to visit family in Duluth, you're going to be transporting that thing. That's a pretty cool. The cup thing's cool. I think that's my favorite one. That's a pretty cool idea.
Yeah, there are super cool plants on the prairie.
For more on the book Sea of Grass, the U of M's Master Naturalist Program, and how to build soil health profitably, see the podcast page for Ear to the Ground episode 380 at landstewardshipproject.org. If you have comments or suggestions about this podcast, contact Brian DeVore at bdevore@landstewardshipproject.org, or you can call 612-816-9342. By the way, it helps us greatly if you can give Ear to the Ground a rating on whatever podcast platform you utilize. And word of mouth is the best way to spread the news about our podcast. If you like what you hear, tell at least one person about LSP's Ear to the Ground. Thanks to Laura Borgendale, Western Minnesota musician, for Ear to the Ground's theme music. And a special thank you to all of Land Stewardship Project's members who make initiatives such as this podcast possible. If you're not a member, visit landstewardshipproject.org to learn how you can support LSP. Thanks for listening.